the news.
Hi, I'm Tessa with Brainrot News with a few bits of news for you to choke on from March 20th. In a move that screams reading, who needs it? Donald Trump has signed an executive order directing the dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education, effectively passing the responsibility of schooling back to the states, or as Republicans like to call it, letting Florida decide your child's future. This aligns perfectly with the GOP's long-term dream of turning public education into a Mad Max-style wasteland where only the strong and the homeschooled survive. So who's in charge of this disaster? Overseeing this grand educational bonfire is none other than Education Secretary Linda McMahon. Yes, the same Linda McMahon from WWE, because if there's one thing the American education system needed, it was more steel chairs and scripted outcomes. McMahon's job is to ensure that essential services like Pell Grants and federal student loans continue, at least until they can figure out how to replace them with scratch-off tickets labeled "win a college degree." Can he actually do this? Not entirely. Since the Department of Education was created and funded by Congress, Trump can't legally disband it on his own. But since when has legality stopped him? This move is basically the political equivalent of lighting a stick of dynamite and hoping no one figures out how to defuse it. Expect lawsuits, expect chaos, expect at least one Republican senator to show up on Fox News screaming about states' rights while mispronouncing the word curriculum. So who gets screwed first? Immediate layoffs have already hit the Civil Rights Division of the department, of course. Because if there's one thing Republicans hate more than education, it's education that acknowledges racism. This means fewer investigations into discrimination, meaning if your kid gets expelled for being black in a conservative school district, well, good luck with that. Who actually wants this? Republicans, libertarians, and anyone whose entire educational philosophy can be summed up as teach kids how to start a business, not history. Advocates claim that this will reduce bureaucracy and give states more control, which is a fancy way of saying, let Mississippi decide if slavery should be called a career opportunity. But someone is sounding the alarm. A few someones, actually. The NAACP, Democratic leaders, teachers' unions, and education advocates are all warning that this will decimate resources for low-income and minority students, because when you take away federal oversights, states do what they do best, gut funding for poor kids while funneling taxpayer dollars into private schools for the rich. This executive order is going to be tied up in legal battles for months, but in the meantime, the Department of Education is already being gutted. If you thought U.S. public schools were bad before, wait until Betsy DeVos comes crawling back with a for-profit learning solution sponsored by Chick-fil-A and PragerU. So there you have it. Trump, a man whose greatest literary accomplishment is not reading the Constitution, is now dismantling the one government agency responsible for making sure people can actually read. America, your next spelling bee word is dystopia. Ukraine just pulled off one of its most daring strikes yet, hitting Russia's Engels air base, a key hub for Moscow's nuclear-capable bombers, and setting off a massive explosion deep inside Russian territory. Russian officials frantically claim they shot down 132 Ukrainian drones, wrecked buildings, fire, panic. This isn't just another battlefield skirmish. Engels air base, located 700 kilometers from the front lines, is where Russia stages long-range bombing runs on Ukraine. So Kiev essentially just sent a message. You are not safe, and Moscow knows it. A state of emergency was declared, residents were evacuated, and suddenly, the war doesn't feel so distant for ordinary Russians anymore. As Ukraine fires drones at strategic Russian targets, military officials from over 24 countries met in England to discuss a peacekeeping force for Ukraine. Trump, in a rare moment of pretending to care about diplomacy, managed to broker a partial ceasefire agreement, one that supposedly stops both sides from targeting energy infrastructure. Good luck enforcing that one, dumpy. NATO members like the UK and France are ready to deploy peacekeeping troops, but Russia is already screaming about NATO occupying Ukraine, as if they didn't already invade the place themselves. The EU is assessing Ukraine's long-term security, and Germany might ramp up military aid, proving that not everyone is buying into Trump's "let's wrap this up" strategy. The reason Ukrainian officials, and frankly most Ukrainians, are skeptical about this whole peacekeeping effort is because Russia has never honored a ceasefire it didn't immediately break. Remember Minsk 1 and Minsk 2? Russia used those to stall, regroup, and rearm. Every past pause in fighting has just meant Moscow uses the time to dig in and prepare for the next offensive. Even as these peace talks unfold, drone strikes are killing people on both sides. Ukraine's latest deep strike inside Russia isn't just about taking out bombers. It's a reminder that Kiev is not about to stop fighting just because world leaders are tired of war. When it comes to peace with Putin, history has shown that only one side ever stops shooting. In yet another five-star disaster from the Trump administration, the Department of Veterans Affairs is undergoing a significant restructuring, which in plain English means slashing mental health services for people who actually fought for this country because someone apparently looked at the suicide rate among veterans and thought not high enough. The administration's grand plan includes firing over 80,000 VA employees to bring staffing levels back to 2019 numbers, because apparently the goal here is to restore the glorious days of veterans screaming into the void while drowning in bureaucracy. Mental health services are taking some of the hardest hits, leading to appointment cancellations, endless wait times, and a general sense that nothing will get better for them. The suicide rate for US veterans hovers around 17 per day, meaning that while the government does this, veterans are dying waiting for care. Hey, at least the VA is making budget cuts though, right? Nothing says fiscal responsibility like saving money on mental health while losing lives in the process. One of the many casualties of this genius restructuring is Joey Cortez, a US Air Force veteran who had already been waiting for mental health services since August. Instead of getting the help he desperately needed, he also got fired because of Trump's return to office mandate. Apparently, if you're not sitting in the government building physically, your job doesn't count. The VA is also gutting its telehealth services, forcing veterans to return to overcrowded VA facilities where they can enjoy hours-long waits, zero privacy, and the sweet sound of underpaid staff slowly losing their will to live. Because nothing says mental health support like forcing veterans with anxiety to sit in a room full of other veterans with anxiety. Even organizations like the Veterans of Foreign Wars, which are not exactly known for being radical leftists, are raising red flags. While they agree that the VA's mental health system needs a review, they'd prefer a cautious approach, which is veterans speak for maybe don't fire the people keeping us all alive. Hopefully, the VA will somehow scramble to hire new mental health providers before veterans are forced to seek therapy from YouTube self-help channels. Unfortunately, it seems that this is just the beginning of Trump's long-term plan to replace the VA with a Bible, a bootstraps lecture, and a one-way ticket to crippling mental health. Donald Trump's foreign and economic policies, best described as a combination of a wrecking ball and a temper tantrum, are pushing Asia to diversify away from the United States. By slapping tariffs on allies and throwing multilateral agreements into the shredder, Trump has made it clear that America's role as the world's economic anchor is more like a boat slowly sinking while screaming about how great it is. Asian financiers and officials are now scrambling to reduce their dependence on the US, coining what they call the America Plus One strategy, which is basically diplomatic shorthand for, yeah, we'll still work with you, but we need a backup plan. The shift reflects a growing move towards a multipolar world where China, India, and other rising economies are playing a bigger role. Of course, replacing the US isn't easy, since American capital markets are like a casino that never closes, corrupt, bloated, but too big to ignore. The diversification effort has led to new trade corridors between Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. Because when the world's supposed leader starts behaving like a reality TV contestant, other countries naturally start looking for more stable partnerships. That said, US investments continue to grow, because as much as the world wants to break free from America's economic grip, there's still a lot of money to be made in a country that spends billions on both weapons and pumpkin spice lattes. Moving away from the US dollar also presents a challenge, because while alternatives like gold and cryptocurrency exist, they're about as reliable as an anti-vax wellness influencer explaining macroeconomics. As global power dynamics shift, expect even more economic gymnastics, unexpected alliances, and of course, Trump showing up on Truth Social to take credit for every possible outcome. Whether the US remains the dominant player or gets outmaneuvered, one thing is clear: the world is hedging its bets because nobody wants to be tied to an empire that's busy setting itself on fire. In a shocking development that absolutely everyone could have predicted, over 46,000 Cybertrucks are being recalled. These $80,000 stainless steel monstrosities are shedding parts like a snake molting mid-commute. The issue? The cant rails, also known as the trim panels, are detaching and turning into high-speed road hazards because apparently aerodynamics and basic engineering took the day off when this truck was designed. Doesn't seem very efficient, does it, Mr. Doge? If you've ever wanted to play real-life Mario Kart with chunks of metal, congrats. Tesla has you covered. If you're thinking, wait, didn't Cybertruck already have major recalls? You'd be absolutely right. Before this, Tesla had to recall them for accelerator pads that got stuck, effectively turning them into bulletproof stainless steel death traps. But hey, at least they still look cool in Instagram photos, which is really all that matters, right? So this is just the latest in Tesla's long-running series of vehicular oopsies. The company, which somehow accounted for 21% of all US vehicle recalls in 2024, swears they'll fix the issue free of charge, which is very generous of them, considering their trucks are out here attempting vehicular manslaughter. Hey, no need to panic, Tesla fans. The stock price remains completely unaffected, because at this point, Elon Musk could announce that the Cybertruck runs on? Astrology and positive vibes, and investors would still YOLO their life savings into it. If you drive a Cybertruck, keep an eye on your trim panels, your accelerator, and probably your entire car. Great news. Government has finally noticed that a highly infectious disease is ravaging the food supply. Their solution? Throw $100 million at it and pray. If there's one thing that America excels at, it's waiting until a crisis spirals out of control before doing anything about it. Bird flu is wrecking the poultry industry, but this isn't just a factory farm problem. Wild birds, especially migratory ducks and geese, are spreading it everywhere, taking out backyard flocks, free-range farms, and entire species of wild birds along the way. Even bald eagles are dropping dead. Surely there's a metaphor there. So let's just keep pretending this is just about egg prices. Small farmers are also getting wiped out. The second one of their birds tests positive, they have to kill their entire flock, because we're still treating this like a medieval plague instead of, investing in prevention. Now, the USDA is investing in vaccines and antiviral treatments because, shocker, mass calling isn't a long-term strategy. But get ready. The second vaccines hit the market, someone's going to start screaming about mRNA chickens and how vaccinated eggs will make your kids trans. Bird flu has already infected a few humans. If this thing mutates into something worse, we all know the US pandemic response by playbook. Ignore it, blame China, call it a hoax until hospitals are full, tell workers to tough it out, and of course make sure billionaires profit. So what's the plan? The USDA wants a vaccine that's easy to administer so farmers don't have to personally inject millions of birds like tiny poultry nurses. The problem? If we vaccinate poultry, some countries might ban US chicken exports because global trade rules are still living in the Stone Age. So the government has to choose between vaccinating and risking trade bans or letting bird flu keep ruining the food supply. Guess which one they'll pick? Hint, it's the one that prioritizes corporate profits over public health. Best case, this actually works and we avoid another pandemic. Worst case, the virus mutates and we've seen how this country reacts to public health crises. If bird flu mutates into something truly dangerous for humans, expect supply chain chaos, vaccine misinformation, and an entire political party deciding it's their patriotic duty to eat raw, unvaccinated chicken. In the meantime, maybe start stocking up on eggs now before they cost $20 a dozen. Welcome to the land of the free, where we like arresting and deporting students for having the wrong political opinions. The Trump administration has detained Badar Khan Suri, a Georgetown University postdoctorate fellow, on allegations of ties to Hamas, which in case you were wondering means absolutely nothing because no evidence has been provided. Suri, an Indian national married to a US citizen from Gaza, is currently locked up in Louisiana awaiting deportation. His crime? Being vocally pro-Palestinian in a country where that's becoming increasingly dangerous to do. This isn't just about Suri. His arrest fits into a wider crackdown on pro-Palestinian activists, especially on college campuses. Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia University student and U.S. permanent resident, was detained under similar accusations. What are those accusations? Being critical of Israel's actions. The administration's message is clear. If you're not on board with U.S. foreign policy, you're a threat, and if you're an immigrant, good luck. The Department of Homeland Security, citing Lil Marco, the lightweight choker, claims Suri is a risk to U.S. foreign policy. How? They won't say. Evidence? None provided. If we've learned anything from post-9/11 America, it's that terrorism accusations don't need proof, just vague insinuations and a media willing to play along. This is the same government that locked up thousands of Muslim men after 9/11 with zero convictions. The same country that ran decades-long surveillance programs on mosques, but somehow failed to stop actual terrorist actions. The same administration that preaches free speech while actively criminalizing pro-Palestinian activism. Georgetown University, where Suri was a researcher at the Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding, seems just as confused as the rest of us. They expressed surprise at his arrest, stating that they had no knowledge of any illegal activity. Translation, the government didn't even bother making a half-decent case before dragging a man out of his home. Suri's detention is just the beginning. The administration is setting a precedent. Criticizing U.S. foreign policy can now get you deported. Today it's pro-Palestinian students, but tomorrow, who knows? But sure. Let's keep pretending this country values free speech and democracy. Great news! If you think corporations couldn't possibly find more ways to underpay workers, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang just proved you wrong. According to him, humanoid robots are about to take over manufacturing jobs much sooner than expected. Why deal with wages, breaks, or workers' rights when you can just lease a $100,000 tireless, complaint-free robot instead? At NVIDIA's annual developer conference, Huang unveiled a new AI-powered software designed to help robots navigate and function in factories. Translation, the corporate dream of eliminating human workers is almost ready for mass production. Manufacturing is just the beginning. Sure, right now they're only targeting controlled environments with repetitive tasks. Give it a few years, and we'll see these machines popping up in warehouses, fast food kitchens, and even hospitals, if you remember me talking about Anna. Huang estimates that leasing one of these robots will cost around $100,000. Which might sound expensive until you remember that corporations already spend billions on union busting and exploiting temporary workers. If they can replace an entire workforce with machines that don't need benefits, bathroom breaks, or weekends off, they absolutely will. If you think new jobs will be created to replace the old ones, ask yourself this. How well did that work out for factory workers, coal miners, or anyone replaced by automation in the last 50 or so years? The jobs that replace them, they're lower paying, less stable, and with zero worker protections. While tech billionaires fantasize about robot utopias, regular people are left asking, who exactly is this progress for? Because unless you're a shareholder in big automation, the future looks a lot like working harder for less money, competing with AI, and hoping your job isn't next on the chopping block. But hey, at least the robots won't form a union. Yet. America, the country that loves to lecture the world about freedom and democracy while simultaneously detaining tourists at the border for no apparent reason. Thanks to Trump's latest crackdown on border enforcement, Britain has updated its travel warnings, reminding its citizens that even if they follow every rule, they might still end up in detention. The British Foreign Office is now telling travelers that having a valid visa or entry waiver doesn't actually mean the US will let them in. Who needs consistency or logic when you can have arbitrary detentions and fear-mongering? This isn't just paranoia. Recent incidents include a British woman detained over a potential visa issue, because why wait for proof when you can just lock people up? German travelers are facing a similar treatment, which forced Germany to update its own travel warnings. Nothing reassures allies like treating their citizens like criminals. This is all part of Trump's ongoing obsession with making US borders as unwelcoming as possible. His policies don't just target asylum seekers or undocumented immigrants anymore. Even tourists from allied countries are getting the do not enter treatment. And let's not pretend this is about security. This is about sending a message. The US isn't just clamping down on illegal immigration, it's making sure that even legal entry feels like a gamble. At this rate, the Statue of Liberty might as well swap out "give me your tired, give me your poor" for "we might as well arrest you at customs." If you thought Boeing's biggest problem was planes falling apart midair, think again. They're facing a wrongful death lawsuit from the family of John Barnett, a former quality control manager turned into whistleblower who mysteriously ended up dead after trying to warn the world about serious safety issues. Barnett, who spent 30 years at Boeing, had been blowing the whistle on nightmare-level defects in the company's planes, like faulty oxygen systems that might not work during an emergency. Great news for anyone who might need that. And wiring problems in the 787 Dreamliner that could cause mid-air disasters. That's really cutting-edge aviation, the possibility of an electrical fire at 30,000 feet. Instead of listening to him, Boeing reportedly harassed, intimidated, and tried to discredit him because, corporate accountability is for suckers. Barnett was found dead in March 2024. In a hotel parking lot from what authorities ruled a self-inflicted gunshot wound, coincidentally, just as he was in the middle of legal depositions related to his safety complaints. His family isn't buying it. The lawsuit claims Boeing created a hostile work environment that drove him to the edge. He had been speaking out for years, warning that Boeing was prioritizing profits over human lives. He was under extreme pressure in the weeks leading up to his death, actively cooperating with federal investigators. I cannot legally say he was assassinated. Boeing has responded with the usual corporate drivel that expresses their deepest condolences while totally ignoring the lawsuit. This is the same company that rushed the 737 MAX into production, leading to 2 fatal crashes that killed 346 people. The same company that has been repeatedly exposed for safety failures, from loose bolts to malfunctioning doors that actually fell off mid-flight, and the same company that keeps getting bailed out and shielded by government contracts because profits over accountability. So if Barnett's warnings were right, and all signs suggest they were, how many other employees have been silenced, harassed, or worse for trying to keep the public safe? And more importantly, how many more planes are going to break apart midair before Boeing faces actual consequences? At this rate, the scariest part of flying isn't the turbulence. It's wondering if your plane was built by a company that treats safety warnings as a PR problem instead of a crisis. That's all for Brainrot News. See you next time, unless the next headline has my name on it.